David.
And I'm Russell.
And it's good to be back.
It's always good to be back.
Slightly oddly, that feels funny, me saying that instead of you.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, I guess we should share the burden of pleasantries at the beginning. But should we start with our usual apologies for being late?
Yeah. We both had colds.
Yeah, I was feeling terribly grotty. We were threatening to record on the Monday, and I was in bed all day just feeling the...
I was on the way to getting better, but I wasn't. I would still have sounded like I was talking like this all the time.
Yeah, oh dear. Underwater old news. We can maybe do that as a theme episode at some point.
Well, you can do that as a theme episode.
What, to sit in the bath?
Well, that's not underwater, that's just in water. Just makes it echoey and a bit splashy.
Oh dear, yeah. So, any news? Any current news, I guess, not old news.
News? You mean like personal news?
Personal news?
Not really.
No, we haven't abused any stepladders, though.
Nope.
No. Excellent.
No DIY disasters.
Good. No, because I spent a week in Scotland on a training thing with work, which was terribly exciting. It really was. I was in the same hotel that Theresa May was there for the Scottish Conservatives. So I resisted the urge to throw rotten vegetables.
Yeah.
And
also, was this the same hotel as is attached to a hospital?
No, that's
that's a different hotel.
That's the other Glaswegian hotel.
I was thinking, surely the NHS, like specialist NHS hotel, wouldn't want Theresa May there.
In case the listeners are utterly baffled, except for our Scottish listeners, there is a hotel in Glasgow called the Beardmore Hotel, which was built originally as a private hospital with a hotel attached for people to stay at if their loved ones were in the hospital.
Is it the Beardmore?
Beard as in hair on chin. Yeah.
Right.
This private hotel was bought and was bought by the Scottish Executive, and so it's now an NHS hospital, and they use the conference facilities for NHS things. But now it also has a nationalised hotel attached to it, which is just the most peculiar thing. The fact that we would have a nationalised hotel, it's just very strange.
It's very 1950s.
It is, isn't it?
That idea,
yeah.
The National Hotel.
Yeah. Interest.
With special national towels that are just a bit too rough and a bit too not bendy.
Well, I suppose given time, everything will be painted that kind of institutional colours of artificial limb pink and
nicotine
yellow, etc. Yeah.
It's old news.
So, should we move on to updates?
Yes, we're going to revisit some old episodes.
Yeah. So anybody who remembers back to episode 1, where we talked about North Korea and the bomb, so we've obviously had the news story of Kim Jong-nam, who is Kim Jong-un's half-brother. So it's the same father, isn't it? The father is Kim Jong-il to different mothers, isn't it? And he got poisoned publicly in an airport in Malaysia, didn't they? Yeah. But yeah, it is a very strange thing because Kim Jong-nam was the presumed successor.
Because he was the eldest. Was he? He was definitely older than Kim Jong-un.
He was older and also the son of the preferred mother at the time. But there was obviously he was the one who was then arrested travelling on a false passport in Japan because he wanted to visit Disneyland, which is
surely all communist dictators want to visit Disneyland. It's the happiest place on earth.
It is the happiest place on earth, except for North Korea, of course. But what is very strange about this is there's then been this sort of follow-up, hasn't there? The Malaysians have asked the North Korean diplomat to leave. And I don't know whether they have, but they had 48 hours to leave yesterday, I think it was. And it's because the North Koreans have said he wasn't murdered or whatever, and then said, well, he wasn't Kim Jong-nam, this body you've got, but we must have this body back. And then said, oh, well, obviously the Malaysians have done an autopsy. They said it was the nerve agent, and then the North Korean diplomat has said, oh, we don't accept the results. Well, why do the results matter if it's not Kim Jong-nam?
Yeah.
It's this utterly...
It's just some random person.
Utterly cognitively dissonant screaming at the top of their voices. But guess what? It's North Korea. It's what they always do. And of course, just recently they launched another missile as well.
Yes, I just saw that in the news today. Yeah,
which just sort of annoys the hell out of everybody. And then, of course, Woolly mammoths
Yes.
made a return.
Well, haven't actually made a return.
But aren't they talking? This still says something about this cycle. We said every 15 years there's this news story that comes back. But this time they talk about it like a mix of elephant and mammoth DNA. It wouldn't be.
It wouldn't be a true mammoth.
I generally have a problem with that.
Yeah.
What's the point?
A elephant.
I mean, a woolly elephant. Well, woolly elephant's a thing anyway. But yeah, it's just I don't get it because you can and likely produce an animal which. I don't could possibly have all kinds of problems with it, or a perfectly healthy animal that's really lonely. Yeah, I can imagine an elephant being quite sort of justified if that's the right word if it gave birth to something that's so different. You may not get like the mother-child bond. It may not nurse, and I don't know. It's just strange.
And then. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
go
on.
So the other thing was Kosovo. The Kosovo train from Serbia to Kosovo, first one stopped, I think, just before the border because for some bizarre reason, having gone through all the negotiations and all the planning to do the first train from one place to the other, the Serbians decided it would be a good move to paint the thing in pro-Serbian propaganda.
Yeah,
just.
Yeah, it's managed. I think that just sort of really reflects in microcosm the point we made in the episode that people, the powers that be in Serbia have to face both ways. So they're trying to do deals and they're trying to exert some influence and be normal, having some sort of normal relations with Kosovo, trying to legitimise their sort of claim, I suppose. But at the same time, they have to kind of placate their ultranationalist wing, which is incredibly powerful. You get ridiculousness like this. We'll send a train that can't go over the border because it's offensive.
Old news.
In our continuing project to be banned in as many countries as possible.
Yes, we're going to offend who? Well, the Chinese, I guess.
Again.
Yeah. Haven't we already offended the Chinese to be banned there? I assume so.
I think you said something nasty about the Chinese at some point.
Yeah, we said something nice. Did I say something dangerous about Tibet? I think. Well, we said something nice about the Chinese in the Korean episode. We felt sorry for them in the Korean episode, and now I imagine there will be a certain amount of criticism in China's direction. I don't know. I'm trying to be balanced. So this episode I've entitled "Hong Kong: The Return." Which very much sounds like a sequel. So, can you remember what the first episode was on Hong Kong?
Surely it was about Godzilla. Go on by that.
No, Godzilla's
Japanese.
Japanese, yeah. Hong Kong. Well, presumably, where did King Kong come from?
Skull Island or something like that.
Right.
I don't know where the story's from. I don't know if it's originally Japanese.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was.
It does kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe we're just being racist because it has Kong. Yes. I don't know. That's something to look up. Perhaps the listeners can inform us. So we are talking about the return of Hong Kong. Well, that's what we all know it as internationally. The Chinese see it as a sort of a taking over, or kind of a returning in terms of re-establishing their own sovereignty on something that was kind of rightfully theirs, whereas we all see it as a legitimate hand back of something that was rightfully the UK's.
I think we all pretty much know it was a case of, we turned up with a flag.
Oh,
really?
Yeah,
it was
for sure, in weird circumstances, which we'll just get on to the minute. There's a whole historical thing, which is really interesting if you want to go down that route. So, the 1st of July 1997, JFK tests, where were you?
Not a clue.
Yeah, I can remember I was a trainee at the time, trainee engineer, and I was on board my first ship, and I was watching the news at midnight on the satellite news. Everybody sort of assumed that the thing would pass over peacefully, but there was a certain amount of tension. And I remember people were very surprised to see that the Chinese had amassed lots and lots of trucks with soldiers standing in the back in ranks. And there was hundreds of them waiting at the borders with the engines revving. And the moment the dot of midnight, the Chinese army came in, it was just a show. It was a show of strength.
Right.
Interesting, there's a friend of mine at the time worked for the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, which is the civilian bit of the Admiralty. They're the ships that supply the RN with stuff. I remember him telling the tale that at the international maritime boundary between China and Hong Kong, which everybody forgets that boundary existed, they were going up and down the boundary, and the Chinese Navy, they were at the other side of the boundary, and there was an awful lot of getting close to each other as they can and going up and down the border and looking angrily at each other. Grrr.
Right.
Yeah. But again, it was just
and from a Royal Fleet Auxiliary ship.
Well, and the rest of the
right.
so they I think they were paired off and generally just sort of, it was all very silly, really.
Okay.
It's all very silly. And again, the dock at midnight, they just turned right, or to starboard or whatever, and they got out of Dodge, and the Chinese came into the territorial waters. That, as usual, the thing that's happening at sea is kind of ignored and unknown and forgotten, but exactly the same thing was happening at sea as it was happening on the land. Old news. So I thought I'd set the scene as a little bit of context. I was trying to think, what did at the time in 1997, what did I think of China? What was my impression of China? So, I mean, what was your sort of take on?
I'd have been thinking of China as communist bogeyman.
Yeah, quite belligerent.
Really. Yeah, quite belligerent, quite mysterious.
Yeah, I think the thing that was still fresh in a lot of people's minds was Tiananmen Square.
Yes, yeah.
And now we're banned. That's it. I said the magic words, right? We shouldn't laugh. X many thousand people killed and imprisoned because of Tiananmen Square. I think that was fresh in a lot of people's minds, and I is obviously quite a young kid, 9 years old. I had watched what had happened in Europe in 1989, and then obviously what had happened in Russia in 1991. But then I could still remember the one thing that did collapse and it didn't go the way we all wanted, of course, was the uprising in 89. So why did we hand Hong Kong back? So I thought, because some people might want to understand the event and why the event sort of unfolded the way it did. So Hong Kong consists of 3 parts, governed by the British. So you've got Hong Kong Island and Kowloon, and they were given to us under the Treaty of Nanking in 1842 and the Treaty of Beijing in 1860, which obviously is also in the background of the Opium Wars. So,
where we wanted the right to sell opium to Chinese people. Because that's good.
How things change, right? This is kind of one of the things that forms the background to the Chinese claim that those treaties were entered into when China's in a very weak position. They're not really very legitimate treaties, they would say. The third part was the new territories, which was under the Convention for the Extension of the Hong Kong Territory, 1898, which presumably, we've just done a deal, give them a bit of cash, and that was a 99-year lease. And so this is why, when the end comes, it's because you've got these 3 territories which have all been incorporated, and it's become impossible to split them. It's just become one big city-state that operates as one thing, and the Chinese are saying, well, come on, it's our turn to get this bit back. And if we're getting this bit back, we're going to want it all, because, we were fighting the Opium Wars at the time. And Britain doesn't really have much of a leg to stand on. One of the first people who was sent as an emissary is Ted Heath in 1980. But before that, we've got this bit in 1972. So the Chinese take their seat in the UN in 71. So in 72, in March, the UN decide that they want Hong Kong and Macau to be taken off the list of colonies. Because they've said they're not colonies, they're not colonial countries. Because if they're colonial countries, the UN would support them into independence. China says, no, these are occupied territories that are administered by another power. So it's interesting that, are they a colony, are they not? I think the presumption on the British side that...
Well, they were a colony.
Yeah.
I can kind of see the point, though. I mean, what's the difference between something you colonise by taking it off other people and an occupied territory that you've occupied by taking it off other people? The only difference really is time.
Yeah, exactly. So you got this sort of weird thing whereby the Chinese are sort of they go along for a while. The reason why they don't sort of invade straight away is because presumably they're distracted by other things. They kind of have this position of they recognise the administration, although they don't recognise the sovereignty. So there's all kinds of talks that go on. They start in the very late 70s into the 80s, and there's a whole sort of period from sort of 1980 up to 1987. There's sort of meetings between Thatcher and the Chinese fella. Who's the Chinese fella? Deng Xiaoping.
Is he the one who looks a bit like a frog?
Yes. Smokes a lot and had the embarrassing accent. Is he from Sichuan?
All right.
And he has a very strong Sichuan accent, which I'm led to believe Sichuan accents in China are considered like Brummy accents are in the UK.
All right.
It's not funny that the number of dictators that have regional accents didn't.
Stalin had a Georgian accent.
Yes, that's right. So he was seen as like a yokel farmer because he was Georgian. Yeah. So there's this sort of ding dong, and Britain tries to play hardball at first. Like we want to keep it. We want to maintain the status quo. And China goes, nah, and says we could invade tomorrow, which they could. And Thatcher rightfully replies, well, you can, be my guest, but we'll all know that world opinion will turn against you. You'll be worse off for doing that. So they have this sort of semi-spat, and then she goes to visit Hong Kong. Interestingly, the first British Prime Minister to set foot in the place. Thatcher goes to Hong Kong. There's this fantastic quote she says out in public, and I think this is just sort of international relations in one quote. There are 3 treaties in existence. We stick by our treaties unless we decide on something else. At the moment, we stick by our treaties. Really? And it just says everything about international relations, that we've got lots of bits of paper that we all agree to abide by until such time that we decide not to abide by them. I just thought that was just very, very, very bizarre. So one of the things that's happening in the background of this is that the Chinese, they amend their constitution, I think in 85, and they set up this idea that they may in fact set up parts of China as special administrative regions, which is the birth of the idea of one nation, two systems. Mm-hmm. And then that becomes the foundation. So you have the joint declaration in the 87 between China and the UK. This is going to be the future. The handover will be on the 1st of July 1997. So the last governor is who?
Patton.
Chris Patton. So ex-Tory MP, quite nice bloke for a Tory. Be a bit divisive, but and he's a politician rather than a diplomat, and he goes about doing like democratic reforms. So there's this whole period from 87 to 99 where suddenly British governance of Hong Kong becomes really political, because whatever we leave behind is what the Chinese are then going to inherit, and so we try to institute democracy, because in like the whole 100 years we've had,
not a thing.
Yeah, not a thing. You damn colonials, you just do as we say. Then suddenly we're all really interested in democracy. Hold on,
are you throwing tea into the water?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, damn it, pay your taxes, colonial. Imagine if there'd been like a China Tea Party. Like you'd be able to walk from China to the US on the enormous pile of tea, wouldn't you?
The sea would just be thick brown.
Oh, we've no tea. How about this opium? Yeah, so you've got this democracy, which would like very limited democracy, sort of consultative council that they introduce, and it just upsets the Chinese. Because what this council does is like starts to make pronouncements that just upset the Chinese, like, we would like to be included in this process, we would like to be consulted in this process, and it just creates all kinds of hoo-ha. Because now the Chinese abolish that when they come in and they introduce like a limited legislative council.
Yeah.
China reserves the right to appoint the head of it, and they also reserve the right to sort of reject candidates.
Which they're doing a lot of at the minute.
At the minute, yeah. So have you heard about the umbrella movement?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sort of anybody who has been in contact with an umbrella and is also on the council, is now getting unselected, deselected, whatever the right word is.
Because you had these people who were elected, and it's weird that they had a banner that said Hong Kong is not China when they were being sworn in to their seats on the council. And that's interesting, because that again sort of points at this, the elephant in the room is the one China thing. There is only one China that we've all agreed on since the 70s, isn't it? It always said there's only one China. And there's obviously people in Taiwan have said, well, no, I'd like independence. I'm Chinese, but I'd like independence. And there's obviously people in Hong Kong now saying the same, and there's smaller voices in Macau. And then there's this thing where they were swearing in these legislative members just recently, and they used a form of words that was offensive. And I always find this it's a thing that can only really exist in those type of languages, isn't it? Where she said the words of the oath, but pronounced them in such a way that they could be interpreted as something else.
You know what I find strange about doing that? If you're being sworn in to a legislative council of some description, and you want to be in there so you can get your voice heard, why would you do something like that? That just gives the overriding power an excuse to get rid of you.
Well, I find it like an ambiguous act.
It's gesture politics to me.
Well, I can see, like, you could absent yourself. You could go in there and just go, no, I refuse to take this oath. You get thrown out the door. You become a martyr to the cause, and you maybe become called celeb. You know, you're kind of that. Because I mean, you could say Sinn Féin do the same, right?
Yeah. But they just don't take the oath.
Yeah,
don't take their seats.
That's what I'm saying. Well, yeah, I don't understand. Why don't they just do the Sinn Féin thing and go, no, I'm standing at the door, but I'm not coming in.
Do one or the other.
Not this ambiguous.
Yeah.
But I suppose then you end up with a long, drawn-out fight where they then get the chance to take the oath again, and it's just more publicity. Maybe that's the way to do it. You just keep drip feeding. You don't push too hard. You just keep push. I don't know. I know what I would do in those positions, but my instinct is to support people in favour of democracy.
I would want them in there fighting for democracy rather than outside, not.
Yeah, I think the way the politics in those sort of countries, it's better to push gently from the inside than it is to shout from the outside. On the whole,
you'll get a lot further with the Chinese government.
Yeah, I suppose
doing that.
I suppose one of the problems is the movement, the umbrella movement. It's quite young. It's lots of students and things, and you remember it's got a lot of hotheads on the outside shouting results now, demands now. I want to hear things said by my leaders that are
hot-headed youth.
Yeah. But these people are very brave. Even though we're criticising them, I still think they're very brave to run on Hong Kong independence tickets in Hong Kong, and facing the might of the Chinese state.
Oh, news.
The next point I've got is parallels with, and I've used a lot of that mathematical symbol for parallel. It looks like double L. Yeah, looks like
I had totally forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Where did I learn that? Was that in history at school?
I imagine I learned it in mathematics. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a symbol I had totally forgotten about.
X is parallel with Y. So the first one is parallels with Macau, because Macau's under the rule of Portugal. But the big difference with Portugal is because in 1972, when the Chinese are demanding changes, Portugal is still under fascism.
Yeah.
So easy to forget that fascism still exists in Europe until the mid-70s.
Yeah.
In fact, when did Franco go? Was that
late 70s?
77,
something like that?
78? We'll have to look up that. Portugal doesn't change till 74. So, out comes
keep talking.
The mighty power of the internet.
The Googles.
I thought it was really interesting because they don't hand over Macau until 1999. No sooner do they become democracy and become the Republic of Portugal, there's a certain amount of essentially just farting about diplomatically. Hong Kong's more important, I think, economically, because it's for a long time it's been the gateway to mainland China. Macau's more a big gambling den. Yeah, essentially. The Chinese just agree to go the same route, and it just got a lot less press because it's a lot less important. But it's interesting how we had all this huge amount of problems. Are we going to grant citizenship to Hong Kong people? We eventually granted them British national overseas status, with overseas in brackets. There's that weird category. Yeah, but I think the Portuguese attitude was very much just, this is straight decolonisation. We don't want an empire anymore. Go.
Right.
To me, it seems a lot more honest and a lot more direct. And I don't understand why we had such ructions over it. I always wonder how many of the people in Hong Kong that feared the future, were they loyal to the British, or were they just fearful of communism?
I'd probably say fearful of communism. I wonder if it's all part of that sort of mythos around the British Empire of us going out and civilising the world.
Yeah.
Or they must want to remain British because we're so British and wonderful.
And look at the benefits we've brought you. You have this lovely shining city.
Yeah. Whereas the other European countries, on the whole, just used them.
Yeah.
Just used their colonies. So when they lost them, they just, well, okay, see ya.
Did you know that there was a very small bit of Hong Kong that was actually like little Taiwan?
Right.
Right. So when the Comintern are defeated by the Kuomintang, or defeated by the communists, there's a small amount of people that escape over the border into Hong Kong, and there's a very small corner of Hong Kong. It flies the nationalist flag.
Right.
And although it's actually like normally under British administration, apparently the police, it was like a no-go area for the Hong Kong police.
Right.
And the British administration more or less had no effect there. They had their own school system and whatever. And then prior to 1977 handover, we the British cleared out to please the Chinese.
Right.
And obviously upset Taiwan.
Where did those people go?
Presumably back to Taiwan.
Well, not really back to Taiwan.
Well,
they'd never been.
Been to Taiwan, yeah. Well, that's just very, very weird that we're trying to democratise and bring democracy to Chinese peoples, and yet a core of it that actually is sort of semi-democratic is the bit we clear out. So the next parallels with Gibraltar.
Just before you move on,
go on.
1975, death of Franco.
Right. The death of Franco, so it's a year after the revolution in Portugal. Yeah. And famously, what was the signal for the start of the Portuguese Revolution?
Was that the flowers? Something to do with flowers?
It was the Portuguese entry to the Eurovision Song Contest that year.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, when that started the broadcast, that was the signal. Gibraltar, yay! Let's upset the Spanish. Should we upset the Spanish? Are you in favour of Gibraltar?
Yeah.
Like, there's all these impossible things, isn't there? Like, do you think we should keep Gibraltar? Well, Gibraltar's kind of weird, but the people want to be the way they are. So much as it upsets the Spanish, and I kind of have some sympathy for Spanish claims of sovereignty. Nah. Keep out, mate. But one of the things I thought was really interesting was that there was the three-legged stool thing we heard earlier, right? Every time Hong Kong said, we wish to be represented in these talks as a third party, Deng Xiaoping went, no three-legged stools, go away. I don't know why he's so against three-legged stools. Like,
well, they're unstable.
No, they're naturally stable. That's exactly the point.
But a four-legged stool is more stable.
Only have a perfectly level floor.
This is why office chairs have 5 legs.
5 legs. Actually, this is mathematical proof that if you have, no matter how uneven the floor, if you rotate a 4-legged chair, it'll always find a level where it's stable.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway,
I've heard that. Yeah.
And then, of course, the big one, which is, it's tempting to make parallels, but I don't know how far it runs. It might be worth discussing it. The parallel with Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
So Taiwan is obviously undisputably part of China, and then isn't after the end of the Civil War. It's unclear as to what Taiwan's status is, and then everybody agrees to recognise People's
Taiwan.
Republic.
Oh, right, sorry.
Taiwan has this special status in international relations, and more nations have moved to recognise People's Republic and de-recognise the Republic of. It took a long time, but now the voice in Taiwan for independence as just Taiwan is quite strong. And they have won elections and held power for short periods. But we can't help them.
Yeah. We're
just vested in the status quo. I think it also hamstrings us in terms of Tibet as well. Tibet is kind of forgotten in this, and that they are simply just occupied. One of the things that Taiwan shows us is democracy really works in Chinese societies. And I think really that's what the People's Republic are frightened of here, like throughout this story.
Yeah.
That it turns out that Chinese and Confucian-based societies will embrace democracy, and we've seen it. I've got a list here. Taiwan very slowly, obviously it was like a terrible military dictatorship for a long time, but democracy has emerged. South Korea,
Yeah, similar.
Similar. Japan is slightly out there, but related. Malaysia's Indonesia, although obviously Islam is more influential in those countries. Successful democracies.
Yeah.
Indonesia is the fourth largest democracy in the world, and then that leads to like parallels with Singapore. Singapore's democracy is a bit. They have this one almighty powerful party that runs everything, but there is opposition, and it's growing slowly. They're on that path to, at some point in the next decade or two, opposition will gradually take power, probably for a short period, and then they'll default back to more consensus politics. Singapore, I think where Hong Kong would like to be. I think that's where the independence movements in Hong Kong are looking at, aren't they? And go, well, they're Chinese, or predominantly.
We can do the same.
Yeah, we can do the same.
Old news.
So the last bit in Hong Kong, which I thought was interesting, is because the one country, two systems arrangement only lasts for 50 years. That's the agreement between us and China. Mm-hmm. They have now what is called the 2047 problem, which is obviously 50 years after 1997. The longest mortgage you can transact in Hong Kong is 30 years. So this year, to 2017, is now kind of the last time you can enact a mortgage for its maximum term. So the question is, in 2047, what's the status going to be? What are China's options here? Well, I mean, if you were the Chinese government, what would you do?
The choices are just let it go on and just say there will be no change.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me, I imagine, is kind of what they would probably do.
Yeah.
Or they say no more, you're kind of phasing into our way, because one assumes they don't have mortgages in the same kind of way in mainland China.
Yeah.
Well, does the state own everything?
Well, I was just looking at a little bit of this, and obviously Hong Kong's not as important as it used to be, because Hong Kong was the gateway into China for business, and that's why Hong Kong was so rich. But of course, now that China has opened up somewhat, then places like Shanghai are just far more important. Mm. They're bigger, badder. A lot of businesses are based there now and only have like branch offices in Hong Kong. Maybe it's not so much of an issue economically. I was just thinking about this. One thing the Chinese could do is incorporate into the mainland China, but make it a special economic zone, because the economically developed parts of China are economic zones within mainland China. Mm. The bits that aren't so developed and are still under the old socialist system are still the poorer parts. So I suppose that's one way you could go, but obviously you risk mass disorder in Hong Kong, I suppose, and a big clamour for people to get out.
Yeah.
If you continue the status quo, the problem then is that you've got demands inside China saying, why are these people being treated differently? And that comes in two forms. You've got Chinese ultra-nationalists, I suppose, that support communist government or whatever. The modern Chinese nationalists sort of going, why are we spoiling Hong Kong? Why are we spoiling Macau? And treating them like this in special ways? They should come under our system. Of course, you've got the internal pressure of people wanting democracy in China and saying, well, if they've got it, why can't we have it? I don't think the status quo would probably be very tempting and be the kind of option I imagine the Chinese would prefer. No change, but then again, if they opt for the status quo, they're creating more problems at home.
Old news.
So that was the return of Hong Kong. Next week, Hong Kong rises again.
The wife of Hong Kong.
Hong Kong meets Godzilla.
And Godzuki. You don't remember Godzuki, do you?
No, I don't.
That was from the Godzilla cartoon. It was Godzilla and Godzuki.
There was a Godzilla cartoon?
Yeah, there was a Godzilla cartoon.
No.
Yeah.
On British TV?
Yeah, well, I imagine it was probably one of those Americanized Japanese cartoons.
Right.
A bit like Battle of the Planets.
Okay, yeah.
All I can remember about it was that Godzilla was dark green, and Godzuki, who was Godzilla's son, I think, was a lighter green and smaller and cuter and got up to hijinks.
So did he just smash small towns instead of whole cities? That's very strange. No,
this episode is going to lend itself to sound effects, I think.
they're not going to be racist sound effects.
No!
Are they?
I'm going to find, like, the Godzilla theme tune and stuff like that.
Oh, right. Even though that's Japanese.
Oh, well, yeah, but we've talked about Godzilla. I'm not gonna put that theme tune at the beginning of the episode or something.
Up from the depths, 30 stories high, breathing fire, his head in the sky. Godzilla, 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 and Godzilla.
Well, can we also then have the theme tune to Hong Kong Fooey?
Oh God!
Which probably is really racist. But
Probably.
it's amazing how these things, they were like considered utterly harmless when we were kids. When we go back and look at them now, you go, "Oh no,
That's problematic.
Out news.
It seems we're engaged in advert tennis for the last Tuesday project.
And it's so far. I think it's 30 Love, really.
Yeah,
Possibly 30-15.
It is, and we've been made out to be, well,
Amateurs.
Well, I don't know. I was just going to say that, like, in the latest advert from those chaps, we've been made out to be. I was going to say
subpar.
Well, I was going to say
BBC Radio.
I was just going to say cool and hip hop, but then again, they used Tim Westwood.
Yeah, so not at all cool.
Well, debatably cool. No,
Debatably,
wasn't his father the Bishop of Bath and Wells?
something like that.
Or
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
He's from like some uber respectable white middle class background.
Yeah.
So we should really have started the episode, with something way cooler, rap, etc. That's more drum and bass crowd, isn't it? Saying that. You look clueless.
This all goes over my head.
Wow. So how are we going to advertise?
I don't know. We're gonna deploy the Pete.
Deploy the Pete. I was going to say release the Kitson.
Release the Kitson. That would be a horrendous sight.
We shall see.
He'll have his reindeer slippers on and all sorts, made of actual reindeer.
Oh wow!
Yeah, they're not the fluffy ones with silly horns and red noses. Actual reindeer slippers.
All right. Well, I have no reason to be outraged about this, given that I've eaten reindeer. I have had reindeer sausage. I've eaten sausages made out of reindeer meat. Maybe I should rephrase that. It was tasty.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, it was like a strong beef flavour.
In my furthering adventures to try and burgerize all of the animals of the world, I'd quite like a reindeer burger at some point.
Yeah, it'd be nice. There's an ongoing joke between a friend of mine and myself where whenever somebody mentions an echidna, is one of the mammals that lays eggs.
All right.
Similar to the
Platypus.
platypus. Yeah. I don't know how this came about. Oh, that's right. There was a.
Oh no, we're going to talk about an echidna omelette.
Well, we were, because there was some sort of meme where there was an echidna in a like a little glass or something, a very cute photograph, and I said, well, can I eat an echidna? And apparently not. And I keep calling him a fascist because he keeps banning me from eating echidnas.
As if does he have like a tank of echidnas? Are you there with an echidna net trying to catch them?
So yes, every time an echidna appears in the ether, like on Facebook or whatever, and I say, a tasty echidna
appears.
Yeah, suddenly a wild echidna appears. Yeah, like my friends there on the internet going, oh, cute echidna, and I'm going, oh, I bet they're very tasty. And he tells me I'm not allowed to eat them. I may not eat them. It's very unfair.
All news.
You can find us, of course, at our website where we're hosted at oldnews.podbean.com.
You can email us at oldnewspod@gmail.com
and Facebook us. Just find us at Old News Podcast.
or tweet us at Old News Pod.
And of course, we'd like to thank bensound.com for their royalty-free music under Creative Commons.
And of course, Peter Kitson for the use of his voice. You can also find us on YouTube, which I keep forgetting to write down. Again, just look for Old News Podcast, something like that. We're quite difficult to find.
We're quite low down in the rankings.
Yeah, we're a long way down the rankings.
But if you care to listen, if you want to listen multiple times, we'll climb those ranks.
And like and share and comment and all the other things.
Feedback is always welcome, and ideas for...
And ideas, yes. Ideas for other subjects would be great. We do have a bit of a list. We keep looking at it and going, don't fancy that one yet. Yeah, iTunes reviews would be good. 5 stars on iTunes would be lovely. I want to say good night, but you're probably not listening to this at night, so goodbye.
Goodbye.
Who is this superhero? Sarge? No. Rosemary, the telephone operator? No. Henry, the mild-mannered janitor? Could be.